mindful before meaning. It's great
Thank
to
you,
have.
Michael. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you here. I met Patrick at the Temple Forest Monastery while I was staying there. We had a bunch of good conversation. And you get the pleasure of being a live, in-person, simultaneous sire. So without any further ado, it is our favorite part of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It is the simultaneous sigh. All you have to do is take a deep breath in, this beautiful air we're surrounded by, and let it out at the same time as me. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Didn't that make everything better?
Yeah, it's a good yoga sigh.
Yeah. Okay, so I appreciate you coming on, and I wanted to keep our conversation going because you had a lot of knowledge about Buddhism and a lot of insights into meditative practice.
Yeah.
The stay at the monastery really supercharged my practice, and I have subsequently been able to get really deeper into my meditation and my mindfulness. So it was really good for me, being in that dedicated space and that immersive practice. I think
That's great.
I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think you mentioned that you might want to lead the audience through a meditation.
Yeah.
Still interested in that,
Maybe I'll
or?
just start with some background of my practice,
Okay, sure.
and then maybe a little bit about what I was thinking for meditation, for maybe a 15-minute intro to how I meditate, or how I'm basically meditating these days.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Um, well, I started with an interest in Buddhism way back when I was going to karate. It would be over 40 years ago now. Well, no, about 40 years ago, I started karate. And then for 4 years, and my karate teacher used to mention Confucius and Buddha and all these different Chinese masters. And but he taught us this 5-minute breath meditation too. And so when I got in my 30s, I started doing that breath meditation again after my divorce. And then, of course, later on, I started doing some dating, online dating, and I found this one lady. She had a profile, and on the profile, she mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh as a great Buddhist teacher. And I thought, wow, I have been interested in what the Buddha teaches. I wonder what Thich Nhat Hanh says about it. So I checked out a couple of his books, and then in his books, every one of his books, he gives recommendations on a breath meditation, where he gives you these what are gathas, or lines that you can repeat to yourself as you do an in-breath and an out-breath. And I really enjoyed that for a long time. And then I got curious and started reading the different Buddhist sutras and suttas from Mahayana tradition and the Theravada. I've even read a couple books on some Tibetan practices. Dalai Lama particularly, he's got a couple of books. So over the years, and then I basically just started off 15 minutes a day every morning. Back in 2009 is when I discovered Thich Nhat Hanh. And in 15 minutes, I just made a dedicated time every morning. And eventually over time, that time grew as the meditation felt more and more enjoyable. And I wanted to do more of it. So I started going to bed earlier, getting up earlier, so I'd have more time. Then I found, through my exploration of what the Buddha teaches, other teachers such as Ajahn Sumedho, whose teacher was Ajahn Chah in Thailand, and he started a tradition, Ajahn Chah's tradition, by starting monasteries in England. And then over time, other students found Ajahn Sumedho, And then we have two of his students now at Temple Forest Monastery. They're the abbots there. They've been Buddhist monks for over 30 years, about 30 or so years, under Ajahn Sumedho. So that's how I found the Temple Forest, because I was reading some of Ajahn Sumedho's books and some of his ideas on meditation. And I really liked a lot of his ideas, which we could probably talk about after the meditation. But yeah, so I found that monastery at Temple Forest in New Hampshire was actually an affiliate, basically an offshoot of Ajahn Sumedho and Ajahn Chah. So I was like, wow, I have to explore that.
Yeah.
So I started going about 2 years ago on a regular basis. Every weekend I go. And then every once in a while I'll stay for a longer period. Like I took a 2-week vacation this last June when I met you. And basically just stayed at the monastery for my 2-week vacation.
And
that's
I'm
basically
glad you did.
my background. Yeah, I'm happy that we had a fruitful conversations, because not only am I interested in the Buddhist teachings, I find them useful and helpful to me, but I have always also had an interest in philosophy, and Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, and Aristotle, Plato. So I found what you had to share very interesting as well. That reading the landscape of all of Western, the Western philosophies. It's interesting, because one of the things I think is interesting is the intersection between Buddhism and that Western philosophical background, which we're all immersed in, whether we know it or not, because we're in the West.
Right.
Ajahn Sumedho actually relates very well. He takes the Buddhist teachings and he relates it very well to the Western mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can do a little show and tell. I have most of them right behind me here. So these are the books I was referring to. I've got the ancient Greek plays that were near the beginning that I started with.
Wow.
Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, Aristophanes. They're really great plays, and they're pretty accessible, especially in these translations. If you told me that I would read an ancient Greek play and it would be like a page turner and not like a chore, like it was an assignment or something, I wouldn't have believed you. Or that I would be laughing every other page and that, I would get most of the jokes. Unless there were contemporary references, and then it's just a matter of reading a footnote, and then you get it, And then the Iliad and the Odyssey, those are right at the beginning, which I actually enjoyed them a lot more than I expected also. And then I have the complete works of Plato and Aristotle. So these are the big ones that and you don't read Plato and Aristotle unless there's you're doing some kind of exercise in just discipline and willpower. By going straight through the whole thing, I'm skipping back and picking out stories as I continue to go. So I haven't read all of these. And then there's Herodotus, who's basically the first person to sit down with the intention of writing a book. And Herodotus he asked all the right questions of a historian, but he was really going around interviewing people and collecting like folk myths and folk stories, and he didn't. And then Thucydides really like implemented a system for trying to arrive at the truth and answer the questions that Herodotus was asking. And then Plutarch is like the first biographer. So he writes about all the famous lives of the ancient Greeks. And then now I'm on to Cicero. And How to Be a Friend is right up here because it's a small book. And then somewhere else, because I'm currently reading it, is here we go. Cicero's Selected Works, and I'm taking a long time with this because it's just, my excuse is that it's super packed, but I actually haven't read in quite a little while. But this is a really good. Michael Grant is the translator, and it's really good, well compiled and put together, and I'm really enjoying it. Cicero wrote about everything, and during a really interesting time in history, he was exiled from the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, as it fell and descended and became the Roman Empire, and he was, he said he made speeches about, and he was right, and he called people out and he rallied against the tyrants, but he wasn't as good at wielding political power and being an expedient and effective politician. So he's like the chief orator of the Roman Republic. But unfortunately, and he was popular among the people, and he published his speeches to be widely read and dispersed. But yeah, if you wanted to join me where I am, I'm on Cicero, and if you want to get this book and we can have conversations as I go if you'd like to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll just keep letting you know what I'm reading, and we can kind of work through some philosophy ourselves, like Plato and Aristotle. Every once in a while. I like reading physical books, but there's a really good website called LibriVox does audiobooks, but Project Gutenberg is an online website, is a online repository of all of the out of copyright classics, out of copyright works. They do ebooks, PDFs, and Kindle file types and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Well, maybe we could talk about that after, like in an email.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in Cicero though. From what you were talking, a few conversations we had where you were sharing some of his ideas.
Mm. Yeah, me too. Cicero is definitely like, if I had to say just read one out of everything, it's like Cicero is it's so good. He just hits upon everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he writes about everything. Like, he does have, and maybe this will get us into theological territory or however you would put it. So Cicero's the only person outside the church that's cited by the Catholic Catechism, because Cicero really believes in this sense of sort of cosmic justice, that there's no difference between the right thing, the morally correct thing to do, and the thing that is best for you, to your advantage to do. That any difference between that, if you think you can do something and benefit from it, but it's wrong, then that difference is illusory. That it's only imagined, and that there can't ever be a difference between the two. Now, it's kind of like a beautiful thing to believe in, but it's a little bit hard for me to entertain that as being true, because unfortunately I do think that bad act people can get away with bad actions. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that Buddhism kind of does deal with this question as well, and
Mhm.
has teachings relating to that.
Yeah. Well, the way I understand the Buddha was that he taught about karma as, and that's just a Pali word, it means action.
Mm.
And he taught that there's wholesome action and unwholesome action. And that whatever action we take, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome, skillful or unskillful, they will follow us, our consciousness. It'll follow wherever we go throughout our lives. And of course, the Buddha did teach in multiple life, but to understand what he was really teaching, it would be a complicated thing to really try to understand in conversation using language. But he does teach that, just acknowledge that. So how it works and how, I don't know, but I do know that he did say that. So when we pass from one life to the next, the karma that we have from our past lives follows us
Mm-hmm.
in that consciousness to our next lives. So, and yeah, that could be a whole conversation too about how karma works. But the Buddha did teach, as far as ethics goes, what you might call as ethics. He did teach. So through his own enlightenment, he came to the realization that he wanted to live. He had this intrinsic value of the body and mind. He felt it as a desire to continue to live. And he thought all beings must feel this way. So then he felt that it would be wrong for him, hurtful to himself even, to take the life of another creature. Because knowing his own fear and trembling, if someone were to come to him to take his life, he realized that that's the same for other creatures around him, and so he took on the precept for himself not to take the life of any living creature. And so what he teaches disciples, when a disciple comes to him and says, I want to have the peace that you have, how do I do that? And the Buddha says, well, first keep these precepts, which he kept as a natural consequence of his own awakening. By being free from suffering and desire, he came across a realization that with all that came the desire to not take the life of any living creature, not take anything that's not been given to him freely by others, to clean up his speech, not to lie, or to participate in malicious type speech. And then sexual misconduct, which for a layperson is basically any kind of sexual activity that is outside of a committed, loving relationship. And then the avoidance of intoxicants, drinking and drugs, basically because those take away our ability to make wise decisions. Mm-hmm. We become heedless, we become careless, when we become drunk with some sort of intoxicants. Those are the basic 5 precepts that many people keep. But the idea is if you could get to the enlightened state that Buddha had reached, then there's no need to keep these precepts as a rule necessarily, but these would be the natural desire of your heart to want to live that way.
Right, a type of integration. That was really interesting. I remember our other friend at the monastery talking about how if you reach nibbana or if you become I forget the term.
Arahant?
Yeah, if you become an arahant, then you just follow your heart.
Yeah.
And your heart tells you what to do.
Right. Yeah, because the arahantship is basically freedom from all the defilements that the mind and heart is afflicted with. So I'll give a little intro to the meditation. Maybe we could do like 15 minutes
Okay.
meditation. Um, so the intro is basically I got my practice from the Buddha's teachings out of the Satipatthana Sutta, which are in, if you look up Theravada, like Bhikkhu Bodhi has translations. Bhikkhu Sujato also has translations.
Hmm.
Those are the two most popular, I think, of the translations. There's also Tan Jeff. He's Geoff, or he also goes by Tane Saro, which is Thanissaro. He's got his own translations of the Theravada Pali text into English. So
Okay.
in the Middle Length Discourse, there's Sutta number 10, that's the Satipatthana Sutta. And in the longer discourses is the Sutta number 22. That one is a little longer because in there they include the Buddha's explication of the Four Noble Truths all the way through to
Right.
the details of those. And then also what I derive a lot of my practice from is the breath, the Anapanasati Sutta, which is 118. It's the Middle Length Discourse Sutta 118. And then, of course, a lot of my ideas I've gotten not just from those, but teachers who were teaching on those, and other ideas. So usually when I start my meditation, I start with getting in a comfortable position. So we can go ahead and do this together,
Yeah.
like 15 minutes.
Sounds good.
It would be kind of fast because I usually stay in meditation for nowadays. I'm not saying that you should do this, and you do it at your own rate, at your own pace. What's comfortable for you. If 15 minutes a day is all you can really handle, that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Even 5 minutes. Some people say that I can only do 5 minutes, and I say that's great. Start with that.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, you practice. If it's enjoyable, it will grow on its own. So I just got to sit in a comfortable position, and I kind of keep my spine straight after I find my center. And then usually, first thing I do is I scan through my body. But before I do that, I usually repeat in my mind the intention of this meditation. The practice is that I would like to become free of all suffering, all the feelings of unsatisfactoriness, and all the feelings of stress or anxiety. And so hopefully through this meditation, I'll find some insights on how to do that. And hopefully this meditation itself will be that for me. So then I go and I start with my feet and my legs and my hips, and I just ask them, how are they? Are they comfortable? And then go through my lower back and upper torso, just the whole upper torso, front and back. How are you doing? Comfortable? And then do my shoulders, arms, and hands. Just asking them how are they? Are they comfortable? And through my neck and head. Is everybody comfortable? And then as I take an in-breath and an out-breath, I just become aware of this whole body. And I ask myself, is there a whole body pleasant sensation that I can sense or feel? So we'll just breathe while we look for that a couple of times. And if there is a pleasant whole body sensation that you become aware of in your mind, then you can take a couple more in-breaths and out-breaths to enjoy that and wish for it to spread or become stronger, or stay with your mind. Now at this point, I'm aware of my posture and I try to keep my back straight. Imagine your spine is like a steel rod, but it's not really, it's just like that. It has the capability of staying straight without any effort on your part, in your muscles in the back or anything. And then you have this straight spine, the straight head, chin is tilted slightly, just slightly forward. So the crown is straight up through the sky, and you allow the muscles in your shoulders, arms, around your back just to relax around this straight spine. And allow the muscles in the buttocks and the hip area and the legs all to also just relax, let the stress fall away. And then you might think of the word energy each time you become aware of this posture of being straight with the spine, but yet relaxed throughout the body. Just energy, physical energy. Uh, the Buddha taught 5 aggregates that we're made of. It is what we perceive as our being. And so the first aggregate is the body. As I breathe in and breathe out, I just become aware of this body. You might say to yourself, there is a body. And these 5 aggregates are interrelated to each other, but we're just going to look at them one by one. How do I know I have a body? Because of the sensations, the bodily feelings. So that's the second aggregate. You might become aware of pleasant feelings in the body or unpleasant, or they might be neutral. And here we can come back to the question, is there a whole body pleasant sensation? If there is, then we just become aware of that. We can then give ourselves permission to enjoy it with each in-breath and out-breath. And the third aggregate is the perception. Actually, it's perception and memory in English. It's 2 things, really, in our minds, I think, in the West. So we have memories that arise in the mind as we meditate. Those are part of perception. And we have the perception now of bodily sensations. and of the body sitting. Or if thoughts arise, then we perceive the thoughts. And those thoughts are the fourth aggregate the Buddha said we're made of. They're really mind objects. So they could be discursive thoughts, where we chat to ourselves inside our minds. Or if we decide to stop chatting to ourselves, they could be just daydreams, memories that arise on their own in the mind. And then the fifth aggregate is awareness, consciousness, that which knows. It's the mind itself. So there's awareness typically needs something to be aware of, like the sensations of the body. So the awareness is one aggregate that is aware of another aggregate called feelings of the body. And within feelings, there's also attitude of the mind, which is part of feelings. So feelings in the heart mind is really an attitude of the mind. Right now, there's probably the attitude of peace, quiet, solitude, because we're sitting in meditation. And then for the rest of this meditation, what I typically do is sit in quiet, just concentrate on each in breath and out breath best I can wherever I feel it. And as I become aware of the body, I just note that there's a body, or if I'm aware of a feeling, that there's a feeling. If there's a perception, that there's a perception. A thought formation, that it's a thought. And when I become aware of awareness, that there's awareness, being aware of all these things, then I can just note that that's consciousness, being aware. And at the end of this meditation, as I come to an end, if I set a timer or whatever, the timer goes off, I'll take a couple of minutes to just reflect on what I just experienced. Was it helpful? Was it pleasant? Were there any insights, any ideas that came to me about my life, how I might change it in some way? And then, or maybe not, maybe nothing. That's fine too. So at the end, we just open our eyes and breathe normally and relax. You're welcome.
Oh, sorry, I had muted myself so the audience didn't hear me. I said thank you for that. And I have I have a lot to learn with guiding people through meditations.
Oh, you're welcome.
Um,
Do you have any questions come to mind?
yeah, well, I actually had a question about, and I think maybe I can ask you if you have an answer, but I
Huh.
think it could also just be a question for myself to figure out. What came to me was, I have a lot of aspirations and like there's a lot of I want to accomplish. There are a lot of things that I want to do.
Mm.
And at time periods in my life when I was very like limited and I was in a structured situation and I had these kind of externally imposed um, deadlines and requirements. Like I had little free time and I had so much to do. So that sense of urgency and that stress motivated me to manage my time really well. And at other periods of my life, if I had a lot of free time, but there were still things that I wanted to do, then I was less likely to do them because I didn't have all of that stress and that. So I was wondering, how I could get better at when I do have free time, still feeling the urgency without having the stress of it imposed on me and that motivating me to act.
Mm.
Still,
Yeah.
still having the motivation to act. Um, and it's almost like, I can kind of explain it with what I know about psychology and stuff like that, but
Yeah. But you're wondering about the Buddhist perspective on it,
if there was
maybe?
anything, it seems specific, so.
Yeah. Well, I think structure is good.
Mhm.
Actually, it's how we get things done. And basically, the monks themselves, their goal is to let go of the normal everyday what we do in life, and just dedicate their time to as much as they can to their practice. But then, what they find out is that, well, there's a monastery to take care of, there are buildings to take care of, there's all this land that's needs to be taken care of. And so they've discovered that there does need to be some time of the day where work has to be done. So they choose to do their work, their physical chores and doing things mainly in the morning. And then, they schedule meal times and stuff like that around that. But the afternoons after the midday meal, that's dedicated to meditation. and reflections. So that's where they'll go off into the woods, sit in their kuti by themselves for 4 or 5 hours by themselves and just meditate. That's the kind of the ideal. That's what they're trying to accomplish, which is different maybe than what you might be trying to accomplish. So,
Yeah.
but I think the same idea applies. They put a container around themselves. They stay dedicated to that monastery. They stay there. They're dedicated to their practice, but they also have to do some work. So they've created a schedule. So I think scheduling is good to a degree. So if you have some things that you want to get done, and there's a lot of things you want to do, maybe just schedule them,
Yeah.
on certain days that you think ahead. Like, well, I think next Saturday or the Saturday after, I'll have whatever time you think could be. Maybe I'll have from 10 to 11:30. I can dedicate to that time, and then just put it on your calendar and schedule it. Make it a reminder so that your calendar reminds you in some way that, hey, don't forget, you've told yourself you're going to do this thing on that particular day. And you could also give yourself this idea too, which is helpful to me. It kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. It's not that I'm going to spend a whole hour and a half doing that, but that in that hour and a half, I've given myself permission to do that sometime in that hour and a half. How much I'm going to get done in that hour and a half, it will be up to me when I get there. And, I don't know how much I'm going to get done, but I'm going to get something of it done. And that's another thing that I see that the Buddhist monks do is, they actually work Wednesdays through Sundays every morning for 3 hours every morning. At the end of the 3 hours, whatever got done, that's what got done. We've got tomorrow to do more of this.
Right.
And they make their plans, but they're always tentative.
The chore is
plans are tentative. So.
Yeah. The morning chore is, well, we're going to make progress on this. And this is what we're going to work at. And then there's always the next morning chore.
Right.
And
and sometimes they change. Like, we were originally going to do this, but now we're going to put that off because it's more important to us to complete this thing which we started yesterday.
Yeah. It could have been the novelty of it, the environment, and all of that. But it rarely, it didn't really feel like work to me while I was there. Now, I don't know if it was, a benefit of the meditation. Well, it's probably a little bit of everything. But I wonder how long it would take before I started to get into my usual, like, I have to do this, probably wouldn't take that long. I was only there for a week and like doing dishes. I really enjoyed talking to, the other people who were staying there, and you and, everyone else. And so it didn't really, and then if it was like a menial task or whatever, it was just sort of a continuation of the meditation, moving and stuff like that. And I don't have that in my folding clothes. Could be like that. I'm looking at a big pile of clothes that I have, and I know that it's not going to be anything like that when I do it here in my own bedroom.
But you could make it like that. I mean, you just told yourself that you don't think it's going to be like that, but you could also tell yourself that, well, wait a minute, why don't I just make it like that? When I go over there, let's make this mindfulness activity of in-breath and out-breath as I become aware of the thoughts that say, I don't really want to fold these, but I'm going to.
Well, it's because of all of the things that I have to do, right? I can't be content. When you're at the monastery, you've dedicated that time to just that place.
Put it all aside.
Yeah, and there's nothing else that you have to do.
Yeah.
Right? You're there to be there.
Right.
And you've made that arrangement and that commitment by virtue of staying there. and you're
So I
deliberate
think you've
about.
hit on something that I basically adopted their attitude and their I try to live the way they live in my
Mm.
own personal life. So yes, I recognize that I have all these wants and desires to do all these things. I too want certain things in my life, but at the same time, I realize there's like a meta realization that, well, it's not all going to get done.
Mm.
Yes, it's what I want. Yes, that's desire. That's what the Buddha says was tanha. There's three types of desire that is the cause of our stress, the Buddha said, and that is the desire for sensual pleasures, and the second one is the desire to become. So, in some way or another, all the things that I want to do that I think need to be done that are important to me, if I really reflect on why, it's because I'm trying to self-actualize in some way. I'm trying to become. And so it's nothing wrong with becoming, because that's what we're all doing here, but it's the desire, it's the churning in the heart that says, I've got to do more, I've got to do more. That is the suffering. And then there's also, on the flip side of that, the desire to not become. So for people who perhaps are not in the same situation as us, who think to themselves, my life is miserable and I would like to end it, that's the desire, that's the craving to not become, and of course, we do have certain types of ideas of that, even if we are happy with our lives. As
Mm.
I could be happy with my life to some extent, but there's something about it I don't like. Like perhaps it's my job I don't like. So I want another job that's better than the job I have. So there's a certain a little bit of desire to not be at that job, but instead be at some other job that I imagine will be better. And so that craving is what's the cause of our stress, really.
Mm.
And the realization that not all of that can be done, that I have more wants and desires than I could possibly fulfill, that I could possibly have the energy to participate in and get involved in. I've come to that realization myself just through living. I'm going to be 60 this October.
Mm.
But, I remember when I was in my 20s, I wanted to be wealthy. And I thought being wealthy would come through, maybe for me in my sales trajectory. I was in sales at the time. So I tried sales, but I wasn't very good at sales. And after a couple of years of trying sales, I found out not only was I no good at it, but I didn't like it either.
Mm.
So what else could I do? So I found out that I was really on a search on what else could I do that would make this wealth that I wanted. And then eventually, by the time I got to my 30s, I decided to go back to school for my bachelor's degree in business management. And no longer was I willing, like, I dropped the idea of being wealthy by that point. I figured, you know what, it would just be great if I could just, like, be comfortable, like, live a nice, comfortable life. I don't have to have the best of everything. I don't have to be wealthy, but I don't want to be struggling financially either. So, it's be nice to just make a lot of money, but not so much that it's swallowing up my whole life either. So eventually I got into accounting, and I work 40 hours a week now. I do make a good income, but I'm not wealthy. But I no longer desire that wealth.
Mm.
But but I was involved in a lot of other things besides Buddhist meditation. Like I was involved in music. I played guitar since I was a kid, and when I got into my 30s after my divorce, I started playing more and more guitar, and so I haven't played guitar in the last 2 years because when I came to this monastery, I realized that these guys were basically, these Buddhist monks were basically, they dedicate their whole life, well, not their whole life, I shouldn't say it that way, because whatever time they've decided to spend at the monastery as a monk, like maybe if they're just starting off, they've only got a 1 year commitment. If they're there, if they've been there if they've passed that 1 year commitment and they want to go on another year, they do that. It's called Samanera. And then after that, they decide they want to stay a little bit longer. They do a 5 year commitment. So, but a lot of these guys who've been there, they have been there longer than 10 years, most of them.
Hmm.
I would say that they have fallen in love with the monkhood and they probably see it that way themselves, that this is their life. And so they dedicate themselves to the practice of realization according to the Buddhist teachings in Theravada tradition, in the Thai Theravada tradition. Um, so I decided when I got there 2 years ago that I really liked the way they worked. Like their attitude was, we're going to do what we can today, and when we don't get done, we'll do tomorrow, and then if we don't get that done, we'll do it the next day. And I realized that I could have these desires to do these certain things, but I was going to start doing it like with the idea of just do what you can. No more pressure on yourself. Just
Hmm.
spend that hour and a half doing what you think you want to do, accomplish. Like back then, I was writing songs. If I want to write a song, working on a song, I was working on this song. But what I would do is work on it for an hour and a half. That's it. That's all I had time for. Time to meditate. I'm gonna go meditate. And then they also do like a bottom line 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening for meditation.
Hmm.
And that's like, to me, that was like, yeah, that became my thing too. Like, so I started getting up early, I do like a 30-minute yoga and then an hour of meditation every morning. And then I do an hour of meditation before I go to bed each night. And then if I was at the monastery and not having to be in my regular life where I have to be at the office Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, then I would also meditate 3 to 4 hours in the afternoons.
Hmm.
But when I'm here in my regular life and I have to work Monday through Friday, there's no time for that. So I'm happy to do the hour in the morning, an hour in the night.
Hmm.
And on the weekends, I try in the winter retreat. I call it the winter retreat because that's what they do. They shut down the monastery January through March, the beginning of January to the end of March. And when they say shut it down, they shut it down to like we were there for a week or 2 weeks, right? For us to stay there, that wouldn't be possible for those 3 months because they don't do that. They have lay people that are living there the whole 3 months. They're called, um, I guess you could call them like, they're doing the winter retreat with the monks.
Hmm.
But I try to, during that time, I'm living my lay life. I dedicated my whole weekends basically to trying to meditate in the morning and I do some chores in the afternoon. I kind of flip. If I was going to run the monastery, I'd flip it around. I would meditate in the morning and do 2 or 3 hours of work in the afternoon,
Hmm.
and then another hour of meditation before we have tea, maybe at 5.
Hmm.
So that's how I would do. That's how I do it. When I do my own at home.
Yeah, it seems um, fighting two different, incentives. On one hand, it's more disciplined, maybe, to put the work first, but
Yeah,
also if you get into the meditation, if you put the meditation first, then you
yeah,
can, as you do the work, you've already spent all of that time in meditation, so it's kind of a good foundation too. So,
yeah. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. And when I go to do my chores, I'm not doing my chores with. Uh, well, I usually do one chore at a time too. Like for instance, right now I have towels that are in the dryer. I mean, I will complete the task to the end where they get folded and put away on the shelf today. But that's the only task that I have in mind right now. And if I look at my watch and go, oh, it's 11:30, time for lunch. Then there's no more tasks.
Hmm.
I'm gonna go to lunch.
Yeah, that's nice. I was thinking the other day, like, it would be really nice to, I'm kind of on the job hunt right now, and
Mm.
it looks like I might pursue an option where I'll kind of be in charge of my own schedule. And I was
Yeah,
thinking, it would, I was kind of just imagining that, and that it would be really nice to every day, no matter like where I was, because there's always more you can do. Once it gets to a certain time, just be done, you know?
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think,
Yeah, you could probably do that. Like, just decide for yourself what works for you. I mean, you don't have to copycat anybody else, but
yeah, yeah.
you can just make a schedule for yourself and just decide, okay, yeah, at this time, I'm done with whatever I've got to do for the day, and this is what I'm going to be doing instead.
Right. Because, yeah, and sometimes, like, if something's just taking a really long time, there's so much that, we let the task dictate the amount of time and effort we're going to put into it. Like, I'm going to be staining my dad's garage shed type thing for him. And it, I'm not sure how long it will take, but I am sure
Mm.
that I'll work on it until it's done, or like some kind of natural stopping point, instead
Mm-hmm.
of just deciding like, well, I'm going to work on this until such and such a time, and then I'm going to pause, and there'll be a
Yeah.
future work period, and I'll keep doing that
Well,
until it's done.
I think I agree with that. I mean, there's also that. There's That's why we can't really generalize, in one simple stated rule like I just gave earlier. But yeah, there's that. So there are times too. Like I had to work on my storage last Sunday, and the person I was working wanted to help me with it, said to me, "Well, can we put in a good amount of time to get this done? Get some stuff done." And I said, "You know what? I'm open for the from from 7 o'clock till 3 o'clock. Like, let's do what we can for that time period, and I'll treat lunch. I'll take us out for lunch." So we did do a lot, and we didn't work that whole time, but it was a big enough project where basically, so for shed, I would say, like, if you've kind of got this idea of painting the garage, and you don't know how long it's going to take, but you got a good idea it's going to take some time. You might say to yourself, yeah, for this day, this is, you know, my day where I'm going to work on this thing and it's going to get done today.
Right.
Whether it takes 3 hours, 4, 5, 6, whatever, it's up to me because I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's fair. Yeah, once in a while you'll get times where, the project itself kind of does dictate like how you want to handle it.
Yeah, that's true. Um, So I have what you were talking about earlier. I have a little
Yeah.
quote from Adam Smith, and I think I shared that with some people at the monastery, and it came up to
Mm.
my mind again while you were talking. Because
Yeah.
one reservation that I have, of course, I have to sort of disagree with, push back against some of these ideas of the Buddha or the teachings. I
Mm.
think that there's more, the best path has a little bit more intellectual nuance, or there's some kind of
Mm.
dichotomy of
Mm.
happiness. That's kind of what I've arrived at. And because there's nothing wrong with desire, and it's you know, maybe I think there's less wrong with desire than the Buddhist teaching, in the sense that it drives us to strive for things which are worthy and worthwhile.
Yeah.
And that ambition can be virtuous. So Adam Smith articulates, I love this quote, I'm going to read it in a moment. It's from his Theory of Moral Sentiments. And he's trying to get at this dichotomy of, you know, yes, you should strive for things, you should have ambition, but it is like the thirst. Maybe I need a better understanding of desire, because it is the when the passion drives you to violate your own tranquility of your mind, that's when it goes too far, right? So you want to simultaneously aim up and strive for something and have a goal and an aspiration, and that, while at something to aim at, while simultaneously being content with where you are, and you have to find that balance. So
I think you just put the Buddhist teaching in a nutshell.
Oh, really?
I think he would disagree with. I mean, he would agree with that, because the Buddha says there's only three types of desire that causes suffering. It's the desire for sensual pleasures themselves. So to me, it's for their own sake, right? The desire to see something pleasurable, to hear something pleasurable, taste, smell, feel something pleasurable, to just have, a pleasurable experience for that sake of having a pleasurable experience. Having that craving, that's the cause of our suffering. And then there's the cause of wanting to become something or not become something. But he also talked about spiritual desires. Well, in the West, we call it spiritual. He called it desire for the practice, basically. Desire for the attaining of the freedom from the suffering. I think one of the things we need to start from is, well, what you were saying, like, we don't want to, the Buddha basically is teaching that there's this angst. There's this inner angst that we all have as human beings in this life, and tranquility. So we want to aim high for the freedom from that suffering, but at the same time not create more suffering, for ourselves and for others in that quest.
Yeah, so here's how Adam Smith put it, and it took me a long time to digest this quote and really understand it. So I'll read it, but it's kind of, just want to warn, it's kind of hard to process. For me, it was. Maybe
I think I heard you quote it at the monastery a few times.
Yeah, I have it mostly memorized. So it goes: the great source of both the misery and disorders of human life seems to arise from overrating the difference between one permanent situation and another. Avarice overrates the difference between poverty and riches, ambition that between a private and a public station, vainglory that between obscurity and extensive reputation. The person under the influence of any of those extravagant passions is not only miserable in his actual situation, but is often disposed to disturb the peace of society in order to arrive at that which he so foolishly admires. The slightest observation, however, might satisfy him that, in all the ordinary situations of human life, a well-disposed mind may be equally calm, equally cheerful, and equally contented. Some of those situations may, no doubt, deserve to be preferred to others, but none of them can deserve to be pursued with that passionate ardor which drives us to violate the rules either of prudence or of justice, or to corrupt the future tranquility of our minds, either by shame from the remembrance of our own folly, or by remorse from the horror of our own injustice. So he really
good.
he frames out the whole thing there, in my opinion. I mean, there might be more options than simply the shame of the remembrance from our own folly or the remorse from the horror of our own injustice, right? There are other reasons, perhaps, or maybe not, to there are other ways to disrupt the tranquility of our own minds. But I like how he says, you know,
It sounds like he's saying that it's all in the mind.
right.
I could bring it down to, like, the theme. It's really all in the mind.
Right.
It's what we think. It's what we think we have, and what we think we want, and what we think we have to do to get there. And it's the lack of contentment of where we are.
Yeah.
That kind of makes that.
Yeah, it's like Buddhism is an ecology of practices to help relieve us of that, you know, that passionate ardor which drives us to violate to corrupt the future tranquility of our minds, you know.
Yeah.
And I like how he says some of those situations may, no doubt, deserve to be preferred to others, but none of them deserve to be pursued to the extent that violates prudence, justice, or corrupts the tranquility of our minds. So there's like real, some of them, you're right in that pursuit. And I just, maybe there was more there that I wasn't getting from Buddhism, but it seemed to me like even just desire, you know, if I have ambition, that's also a desire that I should rid myself from.
Well, I don't think anyone would say that. I mean, I personally, I feel that way about my own life because I've had the experience of having all these ambitions, like I was describing to you earlier, and I had my plans and I worked them out, but they never came about the way I thought they would or should. And the way my life turned out didn't turn out bad, really. It turned out good. I mean, all those things that I worked on did get me out of poverty and into a better lifestyle than what I would have had done anything. But the way I imagined my life to be was not what it is right now. I guess is in details, right? So, the Buddha said that whatever you think the future will be, it will be other than that.
Right.
And that's just a real good general rule that, you could pick that apart in all the details. But what I like about the Buddhist teachings too is that he talks about that there's two kinds of thoughts, wholesome thoughts and unwholesome thoughts. And modern day Buddhist teachers, because we're talking in English, the Buddha talked in a Prakrit, which is like a pre-Pali language, an Indian language that was the language of his day. So, and we're trying to understand it in English, which is not Prakrit, it's not Pali, so it's not. So, one word like tanha, which is desire in English, probably could be, expressed in English with more than one word. Because our English is a little more precise. we use words that are a little more precise than Pali, but even then, there are English words that aren't so precise, I guess. I would give it that because, it isn't. So the Pali words mean one thing in one context, just like English words mean different things in different contexts. But the interesting thing is that, all these different translators who translate the word tanha, they translate it as thirst, desire, craving, wanting. All these words mean tanha.
Mm.
But the Buddha didn't say tanha by itself was what the cause of suffering was. Because there was the tanha to become free from suffering. That's good. That's wholesome. That's going to drive you in the right direction. So what's leading towards suffering is wrong, not morally speaking, but because it's leading towards suffering. Why would you do something that's going to hurt yourself? But what's leading away from suffering and towards more tranquility, contentment, happiness, that's right. Again, not ethically or morally, but just because, we don't want to be suffering. We want to be in a state of happiness. So, and the Buddha said that's possible by practicing a way of life that is harmless to ourselves and to others around us, and is skillful ways. So the Buddhist teachers today, they take the word wholesome and unwholesome, which is kasa and anakasa. I think are two words in Pali, which mean wholesome and unwholesome. But they also translate as skillful and unskillful. So, but in English, in my mind, I think of skillful as different than wholesome. They're kind of related, but it's really different. Skillful to me is kind of like, doing something really good, like doing it well, and it has the results that you're hoping for. Wholesome basically could just be the results itself, like the wholesome results of being free from disease because I'm eating good food instead of bad food, or because I opted to not take poison instead of something else. So that's wholesome is just the feeling good. I feel good being healthy. Feels good. Unwholesome is the opposite. It's the feeling of illness, perhaps. It's just like, illness, I would kind of say it like that. Unskillful is kind of like, well, you don't really know how to do the task, but you're just trying your best. You're learning. It could be that you're learning. Unskillfulness could be that you're learning, and that could turn into skillfulness. So the Buddha actually talked about, like, thoughts themselves aren't necessarily bad. Discursive thinking, if it's leading towards less suffering, is good. If it's leading towards more suffering, it should be avoided.
Yeah.
So
what can you define discursive thinking for me?
Yes, discursive is kind of like using sentences like in my language to think something out, to reason with myself. So it's not necessarily inner chatter in the strictest sense that I'm having a conversation with myself, but in a sense it is. But it's more like problem-solving oriented.
So it's like that explicit.
Having a conversation about my work.
Yeah, it's like that explicit internal monologue type of thinking.
Yeah.
Where it's in words.
And then inner chatter could be about anything. It could just be like, oh, does that guy like me? He seems like a nice guy. I like him, but he doesn't even like me. I wonder why.
Yeah.
You just have this inner conversation.
Right.
And
so you can right. So there's ways to, like, in psychology, there's all like rumination and a rumination loop. I've struggled with that, and that is definitely leading towards suffering because I'm dwelling on problems and I'm beating myself up and I'm trying to use shame and guilt to to motivate myself into action. That's what it looks like for me, right? Now, so I had this time, when I was younger, I had this really ambitious time period where I was really striving and working hard. I wasn't really content with it and I didn't really allow myself to also have fun, which was a mistake. You know, I could have dialed it back a little bit and had more fun. And during this
Yeah.
time period, I think I got habituated into doing this kind of rumination that like eventually motivated me to take some kind of action. And a lot of times it would happen in the morning when I first wake up, like, oh, I really gotta get out of bed, I gotta get ready and go to class, like, come on, I gotta go. And sometimes I would go and get out of bed, but I went through this long depressed period because I had some burnout and I had a breakup, and it was really hard on myself, and I was working this crazy factory job, night shift, and then my sleep schedule was all messed up, and all of these things were happening all at the same time in my life. And this caused me to get depressed. But the narrative, that's the true cause, and I know this now, but the narrative was, a lot of self-blame and shame and guilt. And this was leading to suffering, and it led to a lot of suffering, unfortunately, for a long time. So I very easily could have, they say, recently my friend Dan sent a really great video on this topic, and it was like a combat veteran talking to Andrew Huberman on a podcast, and he was describing how his therapist, some kind of counselor, like basically guided him into what I also had as a breakthrough. So a specific practice for disrupting this, because you can have productive thoughts, right? So there's a lot of shame and guilt, and he used to have this really destructive inner monologue where he was saying, let's say he was trying to do something and he was, wanted to do something perfect and it didn't work out. And then that inner monologue would spool up, oh, you're worthless, like whatever it is, you can't even do this right. How are you ever going to do X, Y, and Z, whatever it looks like. And his therapist said, every time that happens, stop doing that, take out your phone, record yourself, act as if you're talking to a friend who you love and you're talking him through it, and then send me that audio recording. So it sounds a lot different if we are taking care of ourselves like we're someone we love, or like a friend. How would you wouldn't pile on and disparage and discourage a friend, and yet we do that to ourselves all the time. So there's all these little hacks and tips and tricks, but it all comes around to letting go of destructive thinking, and instead, you could very easily say, oh, look, I made a mistake. This is going to happen from time to time. This is okay. It's an opportunity for me to pick up the pieces and put it back together and keep going despite this. It's okay. This is going to happen. Look at how well you're doing, or, it's an opportunity not to give up and not to get demoralized, and like whatever, just more self-love. And
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So
the thing I would love to talk to you about another time is the reality is that even though the Buddha teaches that death could come to us in any moment, there's always actually the possibility that we could live a long life. And so the mind is concerned about the body, and it's concerned about the body's future. And so it's only natural that, even though you look around and you see everything's fine, I'm doing well, today is great, got everything I need. But the mind is always thinking about, yeah, that's great for today, but if something bad happened, you wouldn't be in this position tomorrow or next month, so maybe you should plan for something, so in case something bad happens. And also, maybe you can make it better. So what would you have to do to make it better? And so, yeah, so it's to me, it's just the natural evolutionary aspect of the mind to be concerned with the body's future and to plan for it. To say, yeah, you could do this, you could do that, and you can obtain that goal, and you can get these resources based on that, because of that, and then your future will look like this. Maybe a little better than this. Or maybe it'll continue to be as good as this, if that's what the aim is. And so if all things go well and I don't want to live in abject poverty and struggling, because that's suffering too. So yeah, the mind, it's only natural that the mind is going to want. And then, a lot of times we set these goals, I think sometimes it's good to aim high, but I think we also need to step back and say, okay, I didn't attain the exact thing I wanted, but if I look around, I did attain something pretty good in the process anyway. You know, this isn't bad. This is good. I'm safe.
Right.
So
Could be worse. Yeah.
yeah.
My recent breakthrough with my rumination is I realized how destructive that whole thing had gotten. And, previously I had, trying to work within that thought process, but I realized that whole thing just got habituated and really maladaptive. So now I do something else. I disrupt it and I stop doing that and I do something else. And then when I break out of that psychological framing, then I can sit down and look at my problems and address them.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a huge breakthrough for me. Is like there's no correct way to ruminate, right? If you're ruminating, do something else. Like you have to break out of that. So the whole label this, observe this type of thought processing, identify it, do something else, and then come back to your problems. And I think mine, my meditation practice played a big role in giving me the perspective and strengthening the mechanisms in my mind to observe that and to empower myself not to go down that path and build the strength to see it and understand it and do something else.
That's good. I'm happy for you, Mike.
Thanks.
It's happening for you.
Yeah. So that's the type of thing that people can benefit from with meditation. It's pretty cool how we're here at a time where the science of psychology is kind of validating some of these practices and giving us a different understanding and way of approaching all this stuff too. And I like to see the synchronicities, like Stoicism, when you said the thirst is another word for that desire. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations a reminder to himself, discard your thirst for books so you won't die in bitterness, but in happiness and truth, grateful to the gods from the bottom of your heart. And so to him, books were like his guilty entertainment, right? He would read endlessly if he could. So he wanted to get rid of the desire, the thirst for that. Yeah. So it's cool to have a practice. And another thing, what maybe we can make this like the closing thought. So the whole idea, the whole fundamental thesis that I kind of got from John Vervaeke for this channel is mindful before meaning, to use mindfulness as a way to allow you to connect more deeply more deeply and deliberately with the things that are meaningful in your life.
Yeah.
So that you can identify them, savor them, be present with them. Um, do you have any thoughts on that, or personal anecdotes?
Yeah. I would say that my personal meaning now, what I believe it to be is my purpose or whatever, is to live a life in such a way where I can experience tranquility and peace in my heart and mind.
Hmm.
And I found that in, my meditations, and even during times when I'm in pain, like if the mind could say, oh, well, that's just unpleasant. That's just perceived as not something I want right now. Um, but if I could just be with it, be aware of it, I find that, the pain doesn't stay around. It changes. It
Hmm.
goes away, comes back, whatever. But yeah, overall peacefulness and tranquility and freedom from suffering, as the Buddha put it,
Hmm.
to reach that goal of being free from suffering. And I kind of have, in the last 2 years, been more and more directing my life in such a way. Like I moved from a big apartment that I no longer need as a single adult to a smaller place. And I had put a lot of stuff in storage, and now I'm wading through that storage to give away, throw away, or sell. And that process is just, when I do that process, I'm thinking to myself, well, I wish I didn't have to do this process. But then I think to myself, well, yeah, I did do this to myself because, years before I bought all this stuff, and now, I never got rid of it. So obviously now is the time to do it. Um, but I find that even during that time, I feel happy because um, I am. I feel like I'm going in that direction of letting things go and being in a more tranquil mind state.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for your time and agreeing to
Thank you
come
for
and
having me.
talk to my audience with me here. Um,
Yeah,
cool. So
yeah.
we'll stop that there.
All right.
All right. Bye.